It just start with I am Chase Smith. I am Groot.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm Chase Smith. This is Nigel Robinson. You're listening to Hyperlink, a podcast journey. Today we journey into the creation narrative, discussing the chaos found not only in the text, but the ancient world. So we hope you enjoy Chaos in Creation.
Awesome. Well, wanted to ask this question to you, Chase, just because it's fun. Why are we starting in Genesis, in your opinion?
It's a good question. Everything goes back to Genesis. That's kind of like a tagline that we have. It just,
Yeah.
in Bible study and when we're talking after movies late at night, constantly, everything goes back to creation.
Way too late at night, by the way.
Yeah, that's true. So I think every time we talk about any kind of discussion about life, coffee, anything, because coffee originated in Ethiopia, which is...
Wait, did it?
I mean...
I feel like there's an Ethiopian in the Bible. There is. There's a couple times Ethiopia is mentioned.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So that whole section of the world going back to what? Creation, which is crazy. And that's... We can talk about movies. We can talk about... scenarios in life, but the Bible, what Jesus did, everything, it starts in Genesis.
Yeah. The first 11 chapters are paramount, right? We call them the first 11. Just the first 11 of the Bible lay the foundation, right? And I believe everything in life you encounter is found here in the first 11 books, right? And first 11 chapters, of this Bible, of Genesis. So we have, a collection of stories that are intertwined from genealogies that lay a foundation for this narrative. God is just laying out what it really is a foundation. So 1 through 11 are kind of like the preamble, if you will, or like the introduction. And in my opinion, kind of how I see it. They're foundational concepts needed to help everyone, right, understand what the rest of Genesis, therefore the rest of the Bible, is saying. But see, the fun thing is Genesis is kind of a preamble to the Torah. And the Torah is kind of a preamble to the Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, or all of the scriptures, depending on how you look at it. It's not what it's important to note here, right now. It's not 66 books, separate books. It is one long narrative. And if you come in the middle of a story or a narrative, right, you might assume things are different than they actually are. Like if you came in the middle of a certain movie or a story, you might assume the villain is actually the hero and the hero is actually the villain, depending on where you fall in, right?
Yeah. Especially with the hero journey.
Especially
coming in at the down moment of their life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally changes the story.
Can change the story. Because why? Because we would have missed the introduction. You missed the setup. The world is literally being created. All of life hyperlinks back to the Bible. And all of the Bible hyperlinks back to Genesis.
Yep.
So, maybe even all of life hyperlinks back to the first 11 chapters, the first 11.
Yeah, it is wild. It really is wild. Like, we say Genesis a lot, but I think we're most of the time when in conversation, we're talking about the first 11 chapters.
Yeah, and almost just the first
almost
three.
The first three, yeah. I was going to say that, yeah.
It's crazy. So, it's kind of like this, right? Have you ever thought about this? Like, it's like a seed. It's small, and it kind of seems insignificant, right? Yet, if planted and cultivated correctly, the seed can grow into this large, massive tree that brings shade for people when it's hot, that you can use the wood to create fire, to build houses, to build structures, all because of one seed, right? It can turn into the mighty tree and become, and all that is really just written in the seed, in the DNA of the seed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Didn't Jesus say, like, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that grows?
Yeah. That's where I was.
Well, that seed seems to be Genesis 1 through 11, where it starts, and then it grows into the rest of the narrative.
Like that actually, yeah. That's a good visual.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Before we dive into the narrative, though, guys, we're going to talk some context here. Chase, who are the original heroes of the Genesis
story?
Genesis
Or
story?
Genesis. Just the Genesis. In general.
Genesis. Who are the original heroes of the Torah?
Well, Moses went up the mountain, came back with a book. Well, I don't know how. I don't personally know when he wrote it, but
A leather-bound book with
yeah,
paper.
Perfect,
Printed on the Gutenberg press.
Yeah, it was to the children of Israel after they were enslaved for 400 plus years in Egypt.
Yeah.
This was their first introduction into their history, really.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, they had their stories. Like, they probably knew generically.
Okay, like
I'm guessing.
Their forefathers? Like who?
Like, just past, well, the Hebraic culture was a story. I mean, any time in that any culture was always fire, dinner, stories, telling, and the stories you would tell were of what occurred.
Sounds amazing.
And yeah, there was probably poetry, there's probably things that they came up with, but most of the time it was weaving a intricate and interesting way of telling a story that had already occurred and sharing it in a way that was gonna grapple. Is that a word? Grapple.
It's okay.
Grapple the attention of children.
Yeah. So who were their forefathers though? Like who were the people they were telling stories about that you assume?
Telling stories about?
Yeah, who do you think they might have been telling stories about while they're huddled around their dinner tables as being slaves in Egypt? They still ate dinner, I'm assuming. And when they're huddled around their dinner table, who were they telling stories about?
Adam, Eve.
Maybe.
Abraham for sure, I feel like.
I would say Abraham for sure. I don't think they would knew Adam and Eve yet. Noah
would be a thing.
The flood story would be a thing. Yes. Did they know it was Noah? I'm not sure. We might get there later.
I thought about that.
But yeah, but definitely Abraham, Isaac.
Yes.
Jacob for Joseph, sure. Right? Yes. The reason they're in Egypt.
Yeah. Exactly.
Thanks, Joseph, or Judah, or somebody. But that, yeah. So, now if you remember, I mean, I'm just testing you. This is fun. Do you know where Abraham/Abram, when he was called, came from?
The land of
which is in Chaldea.
Yes.
Which is ancient Mesopotamia, isn't it fun, guys? Yeah. Abraham.
I learned that in school, actually.
Awesome.
I was homeschooled. Fun fact.
Homeschool kid.
Yeah. You can still learn the Bible.
And you can still be kind of cool.
Yeah. That's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, though.
To be relatable.
I'm joking. If you're homeschooled, no offense.
No.
But if you are offended, the Bible says don't be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, if you're homeschooled, get out more.
So, do you remember what Abraham's father was? Do you remember his vocation?
I was going to say tent maker. That's Paul.
That is Paul.
I don't remember. You're going to say it and I'm going to remember.
Idol maker.
Oh, yes, that's right.
So do you think Abraham knew the ancient myths and gods and celestial beings of Mesopotamia?
He was probably very well versed in all idolatry.
Yeah, interestingly enough, right? Not that we're not, of course. The ancient world, as you said, they passed this down, right? Do you think that in 400 years of his family, they never asked how the world began? And if Isaac asked Abraham how the world began, we don't know for sure that God already told him this story because it's not written down.
Right.
It doesn't seem to be passed down. But what we do know for sure is that he probably knew the narratives of the Near Eastern cultures, Mesopotamia being the major one.
Yeah.
And he probably passed some of those things down. I mean, I can't be for sure, but they definitely had legends of the flood.
Yeah.
They had legends of how humans were made, how the world was made. They had legends of why humans can be terrible, like original sin, we call it, right?
Yes.
They had legends of those. They had myths, right? Of course, they did not have well, question. Do you think they had a concept of good and evil? Right and wrong?
That's a good question. I think we have I think we're born with like conscience.
Okay.
And like the word is written in our DNA. Like it's not like it only happened after the Bible was written. Like
exactly.
Who God is written inside of us. So I would say I would lean towards yes.
Yeah, I would too. I'm not God. I don't know. Yeah. But I would lean toward yes. They probably even but they didn't have Torah yet, right?
Right.
So what did they think? I assume they probably thought much like their neighbors. So let's dive a little deeper, and we'll kind of dive into why I think that as we continue, but let's dive a little deeper into the ancient Mesopotamian ideas that were so pervasive in the Near Eastern world, okay, during the Exodus story, right? So first character to know about, Marduk. He's the ancient Mesopotamian patron god, co-opted by the Babylonians as well. The Babylonians called him Bel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. You're familiar with Bel. People who read the Bible, a little parts of it are familiar with Bel, at least.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Baal, Bel, however you want to say it. You can say it the right way, the wrong way.
It feels weird.
Tiamat is another one. It's the villain of Marduk. It's really, it was a she, and she was really the bringer of chaos. Huh. So those are two people to kind of pay attention to. I'm going to read, some of how their creation story, their epic, is described. Tiamat is usually described as a sea serpent or a dragon. That's keep note of that.
Any relation to, oh man, the behemoth?
Possibly.
In scripture?
Yeah, or Leviathan?
Leviathan, thank you.
Yeah, possibly. And there's a reason for that, and that's why we're gonna dive into today. So good question, Chase.
Sweet.
Marduk is a human in a robe with stars on it, typically.
Okay.
Holding a snake and a spade, or like
shovel?
a shovel, like a agricultural tool of the day.
Agriculture.
Yeah. Okay, so those are key symbols: dragons, serpents, stars, and spades.
Yeah,
key symbols in their stories, in their epics, in their myths, right? So the Babylonian creation myth, it starts with this guy, Enuma Elish, excuse me, tells the story of Marduk's rise to power. In the beginning of time, the universe was undifferentiated, swirling chaos, which eventually separated into sweet fresh water, known as Apsu, the male principle, and salty bitter water, known as Tiamat, the female principle. These two deities then gave birth to other gods, right? So Tiamat loved her children, but Apsu complained because they were too noisy. No dad has ever complained about the kids being too noisy and keep them up at night.
Are you a dad, Michael?
Yes, 3. While distracting him, they were too noisy at night, and they were distracting him from work during the day. So we have night and then day also talked about in that order.
This feels oddly modern.
Yeah. Eventually, he decided to kill them. I'm sure it's a modern dramatization, a modern retelling, so we can understand it better. It's not like the exact words pulled from their text. But yes, so then he decided to kill them, and Tiamat, horrified, told her eldest son, Enki, about the plan.
This dude killed his kids?
No, because Enki, he was about to, he wanted to.
Oh, okay.
Then Enki considered the best possible course of action, put his father to a deep sleep and kill him. So no, he didn't kill his kids killed him, which that just reminds me of like what was it? I'm not a big psychology person when it comes to studying those people, but wasn't it Freud who said that every man wants to kill his father? I think that's like one of the psychiatric tenets of Freud, one of them. But yes, it just reminds me of that. It's like, yeah, this kid killed his father, right?
It reminds me of the story of kings. If you've seen enough movies where like there's always like the kid who wants to be the prince who wants to be king now,
and he has to kill his father.
And he has to kill his dad.
Yeah. So from Apsu's remains, this kid Enki created his home, the earth, and the marshy region of Eridu. Excuse me. Tiamat never expected her son to kill his father, so therefore she declared war on her children, raising up an army of chaos to assist her. And the head of her forces was she placed the god Quin Gu. That's how I'm going to say it. Her new consort, right? Her new lover, who is victorious over the young gods in every battle. Enki and his siblings begin to despair when the young god Marduk steps forward and says he will lead them into victory if they will first proclaim him as their king. Once this is accomplished, Marduk defeats Kingu in a single combat and then kills Tiamat by shooting her with an arrow. What tool do you use for an arrow? A bow. I feel like that's gonna come back in the Genesis story, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, it's crazy. So he defeats her with an arrow, which splits her in two. From her eyes flow the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. And from her corpse, Marduk forms the heavens and completes the creation begun by Enki, of the earth. And in some of the versions of the myth, Enki is not even mentioned. Marduk is the sole creator of all the worlds. In consolation with Enki, Marduk then created human beings from the remains of the defeated gods who had encouraged Tiamat to wage war on her children. The defeated Kingu is executed, and his remains are used to create the first man, Lulu. All right. So from
Lulu? Not Lulu?
No, Lulu. Exactly. From a regional archaeological deity, Marduk became the most important and powerful god of the Babylonian pantheon, attaining a level of worship bordering on monotheism. Okay?
Meaning one god.
Back then, everybody believed in polytheism with multiple gods. They bordered on monotheism. He was the god of gods, right? The Greeks later associated Marduk with Zeus. The Romans would name him Jupiter, as he was known as the Babylonians, king of the gods. That's what Babylonians called him, Bel. Bel means Lord. So he depicted as a human in royal robes with stars on him, carrying a snake and a spade. Marduk's name literally translates bull calf, although he was commonly referred to as a Bel, as I said. Far from the local deity he sprang from, Marduk would become one of the most prestigious gods of the Mesopotamian pantheon. So Marduk and Bel are the same dude. And this reign was centered not in the heaven, but in the temple. So they believed that Mesopotamians, that the Egyptians, gods, they believed their gods dwelt in the temples that they built for them. So there's a scholar, Jeremy Black, and he writes this: the rise of the cult of Marduk is closely connected with the political rise of the Babylonians, from city-state to the capital of an empire. So basically, Marduk became more and more powerful within the eyes of society as the Babylonians became more and more powerful within the eyes of society. Chase, thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah. Okay, the first thing that caught my mind, and I don't know how much time we have, but I kind of don't care. So there's the whole male principle and female principle. What's that about? Are we getting into that later?
Not exactly.
Curious.
Not exactly.
Because there's like, and stemming from that too, I'll add to this, is just like separate thought. But there's this whole concept. There is male, female, I guess, in this sense. There's two. It takes, I guess, both of them in one form or another to create the world. But almost every single time I've heard about like the Greeks, like ancient mythology, it's always, the world always comes out of chaos, but their version of chaos is always like killing each other and like using the remains of somebody else, which is like really morbid if you think about it.
Yeah.
Like it's always like, oh, from death came life. Okay, I can write on that, but like there's still this really creepy sense of there has to be like mortification and like somebody has to kill somebody and then like magically like something beautiful happened from it afterwards, which is like, that's not normal consequences.
No.
I mean, I get cycle of life, death, the ground, you turn into dirt, flowers come up after that. But like, there's still like this, like the world was seeded from the remains of a dead god, which is like really weird.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what the full, like, rationality was to always get to that point from every like ancient religion almost. But
it makes a good story.
It's an interesting story, but I think that the idea is that there's these things that were before otherworldly, before creation itself, and that is how matter came into existence, was because these things were already in existence. And I think they're trying to explain like what these ancient myths do, which we really don't understand myths well as Americans, as Greek-minded, analytical, fact-based human beings. We don't trust the science human beings. We do not understand myths well. Okay.
Yeah. That's not in our culture.
We don't. So, that's how they lived it. Like, they lived these myths, and these myths, maybe they thought they were factual. I think a lot of times they did, but they were really diving into a deeper truth that the myths, conveyed. There was a deeper truth that they conveyed, right? And that is what we're going to kind of get into here. Any other thoughts though, before we do get into that? I'm just curious. It's an interesting story.
Yeah, it's funny.
There's a lot of parallels.
Yeah, I've actually not heard this story. I've heard of conceptually of like Mesopotamia and the gods and different things, but like this is fascinating to me. My brother is somebody who's really into ancient mythology, and he would probably have heard this stuff. So it's very fascinating. It makes a great story, great for campfires, but it's just like it's like kind of fantasies, like novels and stuff.
Do you? Yeah, it is, and we'll get into how this correlates with fantasy later on, but and sci-fi and all that stuff. But here's what's interesting. I want to get to. Do you believe that the ancient Israelites in Egypt, 400 years plus, do you believe that they had some version of this they were passing down? Possibly.
Yeah.
You think it's possible at least? Yeah. And I think
they had to have something.
I think that they believed Marduk was Yahweh. In fact, there's some writings about Marduk where they started saying that some of the other gods you thought were him, they were just characteristics of who he was. They were putting names to a god, and then you realize later on, no, that's Marduk, because essentially every culture wanted to worship Marduk because he was so powerful. He was like their god who gave them provision. Yeah. That's why he had the spade, the agricultural tool. He was the god who defeated the sea and the darkness and the chaos of the sea, and he would bring the spring rains to bring provision, right? And so he was that god that would give them. So every cult, and he was then seen as the god of gods, the king of kings, in their culture. And so they started like saying, no, the god I really serve is Marduk. It was just a facet of him. So I do believe that Marduk and Yahweh in the Israelis' minds at this time when they left Egypt were convoluted. And I'm getting ahead of myself because we'll get there. But like, the question I want to ask you is, why do you think God is giving them the Torah? Why is God giving them Genesis?
So I'm a dad too. One of the things that like I think if you're a good dad and you generically want the best for your children, which I think most dads do, you want to kind of set your kids straight. Like you want to set them on the right path.
Yes.
There's a lot of confusion, and there's like a lot of what ifs, a lot of like, well, we're going to do, I think the whole like not, monotheism, what's the multifaceted?
Polytheism.
Thank you. Polytheism. There's a fear that I think that people have when they celebrate multiple gods, because they're like, well, we don't know which one's there, which one's the right one. So we're just going to we're just going to like give homage to all of them.
Okay.
Which is a lot of work if you think about it.
So much.
And it's a fear-based worship.
Wow. Very good. We'll get into all those things coming up. Yeah. So good. So, see, I think God is creating a nation. Well, I know he is. That's what he's doing. And people who have never been a nation before.
Yeah.
All nations have something in common when they become a nation. 3 things. Especially back then, but even today. The gods they serve, the history of the world and their people, laws and religious ceremonies.
Yeah.
That's still even true today. We just don't use the word like religion or like gods. We use the word ideologies in our postmodern world where we hyper focus on intellectualism.
Yeah. And scientific law, which are just rules.
Laws, yeah. Oh, just moral laws, scientific laws, the whole thing, laws of the land. And then you have, the history of the world, and the history of our people. Like, we understand America, like, we know America's story. They were trying to get, an exodus from Europe, right? Because of one, of freedom of religion and free from taxes.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I could feel like that today. I would like both those things again in America.
Want to start a nation? Let's start a nation.
But fun fact, the Constitution and amendments were actually the first documents after the mental and physical exodus of England, right? And I say mental and physical because the Declaration was the mental, and then the physical was the Constitution. And then you have 34% of those actually directly quote the Bible, which is super fun fact.
Yeah.
It's a large amount. But we're not there. But these are the building blocks of a nation: laws, religion, and history. So what does God give the Israelites in the desert to start the process of becoming a nation? What is the first piece he gives them? Genesis chapter 1. Chase, would you mind reading Genesis chapter 1, verse 1? We're finally to the Bible.
Wow. We're opening it up.
That's important.
What version is this?
ESV.
Oh, cool. It reads nice. 1:1. That's it?
We're going to read, and then I'm going to stop you. We're going to be going.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Reads this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Pause. Fun fact. The word created is, it's a blue collar word. It's more of like carver.
Okay. Like,
so it's not like
wood carver?
Yeah.
Or blacksmith?
Or like carver of bricks?
Bricks or idols?
Idols? God is so important, man. It's a blue collar word. Chase, why is that important? You have something.
Well, it makes me think of like what Jesus' trade was.
Okay.
Which was more of a blacksmith. We say woodworker, but it was like someone who worked with earth elements. Like,
yes.
Earthly materials.
Interesting.
And fashioned them into something
interesting,
else.
Right?
Yeah.
Which also, what was the Israelites doing for 400 years?
Sorry, what?
What were the Israelites doing in slavery? They were building
bricks and stone and manufacturing buildings and whatever else, digging ditches.
God is identifying. He's saying you're not the only ones, right? Yeah. And I create too. I'm a carver as well.
Movers of earth and stone.
So good. Keep going.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
God, my mind's blowing up right now. This is so good. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep.
Pause. All right. So first off, there's one God. There was in the beginning was God. There was one, not multiple. Two, the earth was chaotic nothingness. How did this Mesopotamian creation myth start? The words they used were undifferentiated swirling chaos.
Yeah.
Which eventually separated into salt water and fresh water.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that actually. Water. I just thought of water and like land, but like salt water and fresh water.
That's what it said. It did. It said sweet water and salt water, but same thing. So undifferentiated swirling chaos. It says chaotic nothingness. The Greek word or the Hebrew word, tohu bovohu, which means a good like picture or a good way to think about it is chaotic nothingness.
Yeah.
In the beginning earth was formless and void. It was chaos and it was nothing at the same time. It's so similar to what this Mesopotamian creation epic has at the beginning.
You know what that makes me think of is the flow of energy. I've actually never thought of it this way, but like chaotic nothingness sounds like something that you feel and it's present, but not something you necessarily see, which would make sense because it's dark. I mean, he literally gets to the point where he creates light, but like there's this chaotic nothingness. Like I think we experience that when we are in a dark place in our physical bodies and the state in which we are prior to
Don't get ahead of us. Don't get ahead of us, Chase. Don't get ahead of us. It's so good. It's so good. No, it's so good. That's why we do these. All right. So darkness was over the face of the deep.
The deep.
Deep is important because deep water is different than fresh water, right? So like the ancients, they could navigate. They can navigate some rivers at this time. They could do that, but like deep water navigation was not a thing.
Yeah.
They were immensely afraid of it.
Because it's the most chaotic type of water.
It's the most chaotic. Like if a ship sank, they use the word it got swallowed up by the sea. We've heard that, right?
Yeah.
Swallowed up by the sea. That's because no one ever saw it again.
Yeah.
They didn't have technology to go down there in submarines and see the wreckage of Titanic. It was just gone.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
So then, and the storms on the sea were harsher because not only was the weather coming from above, but also from below, and it was shifting, and it was crazy. So like, deep is important. Darkness is important, right? Darkness was over the face of the deep. So in the beginning we have Creator God, right? He's three parts. Three is so important in this first chapter. The number 3 is everywhere. He's creator, he's spirit because he breathes, and he speaks. I don't think we got to the breathing part yet, or the spirit. The spirit was hovering over the face of the deep, right? Mm-hmm. Wow. So he's creator, he's spirit, and he's word. 3 parts. Cool. Got it? 3 is important. Put a pin in it. We'll be back to it. So, what is God doing? In the first 2 verses, did you read verse 2 yet? Finish it?
Not all the way. I didn't
finish verse 2 and we'll go.
Okay. I think that we got to...
You can just read 1 and 2 together.
I'll just read all of it, yeah. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void.
Tohu bovohu, chaotic nothingness.
And darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters.
Okay. In the first 2 verses, Yahweh is shifting their entire worldview to what we would call biblical, accurate worldview today, right?
Yeah.
Yet he is using the symbols that they understood. He's establishing his language to be seen throughout the rest of the scriptures as well. So we have 3, we have spirit, we have word. First time these things are mentioned here, they're all over. They're pervasive throughout the rest of the scriptures.
Wait, are you saying that God met his people where they were at and used terminologies that they were familiar with to give them the creation story?
100%.
Wild.
Yes. Yes, because for them, again, myths back then were truth. There's a deeper truth, and what it is, there was an understanding of these truths in the world that they couldn't put words to. That didn't make sense, right? There's chaos in the world. Why? Well, let's put Tiamat to the chaos, right? That's why she's the sea goddess, and there's a picture is most often of a serpent, a sea serpent. Why the sea again? The seas are chaos, are unknown, right? So then there's no picture of the deep. We've already talked about that. But then you have darkness. Like their world was not safe. Like we have lights, we have cities, we live in like groups and communities. Man, when it was dark, there was core fear unlocked back then.
Yeah,
it was dark.
Right.
And what lurks in the dark, man, there's predators that come at night. Did you know lions are nocturnal?
I think I did.
Yeah. That's scary.
Yeah.
Like that. I don't want to face a lion at night. I don't want to face it in the daytime.
That's why fire was so important. That kept animals away.
Worst kinds of evil, right? Yeah. Evil men attack at night.
Yeah.
You can't see them.
Cover of darkness. It's used.
The ancient world was so much more dangerous, right? So their myths, the legends are born to help them put worldly images on what they understood as core or otherworldly, right? We still do that today. So horror films, right? Modern day sci-fis, fantasies. Fun. Let's just think of some. The Never-Ending Story. I don't know if you've ever seen it. If you haven't, maybe you watch it. I don't know.
It's actually good.
I don't think it stands up to the test of time. He does.
No. It's like terrible quality, and but I get like the core story.
But what is coming after them? What is coming after them in the book?
I haven't read
the nothing. The nothing. In the beginning, the earth was formless and void. There was nothing.
Right.
Chaos, nothingness, right?
Yeah.
The nothing was coming after them. There's a movie called Pitch Black, right? I don't know if you've seen that one.
Vin Diesel.
Yeah. And when it's dark, all the critters come out to kill them, and they can't be in the light. I feel like I've seen that somewhere. Oh yeah, Lord of the Rings. Because Lord of the Rings, only the dark, they can only rule. They have to have the shade of the clouds or something. They can't be in the light.
Yes.
Aliens, the movie Aliens, all of them. There's the creatures from outside of our world using us as a host to turn us into violent chaos creatures.
Yeah.
What? Like, it's everywhere. Like, we use the same images. Darkness, nothing, the blackness of night, of the sky. I'm convinced that our obsession with space and films and sci-fi is really because we understand there's unknown entities and we can't put words to them, so we created aliens. And that's what it is. It's like our way of saying, like, this is how we put worldly human language to what is other human.
Yeah. Huh.
We can keep going. There's so many. I mean, anything you've ever seen in those genres is probably tied to some ancient symbol of chaos and destruction. So the ancient had, it is, right? The ancients had an intimate understanding that there are powers of this world unseen, cause chaos and order. They cause blessing and curses.
That reminds me of, we do not fight against flesh and blood.
Mm-hmm.
What we do see, we fight against the powers, the principalities, and I forget what the other word is, basically of this present darkness, this present age, of the air.
Yes.
The prince of the power of the air.
Yes.
Which is like this ethereal, kind of goes back to energy, which is like something you cannot see, but something you absolutely can feel.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that God is energy. We're not saying that.
No,
we're just saying that we put those words to it because we can't understand it.
Right. But I think that there is an energy and a vibrancy that he brings in because he ushers that in. Just like Satan is trying to usher in his own type of energy. But he can't.
We're getting there. We're getting there. We're not there. Okay. All right. So so there's blessings. There's forces outside of ourselves that bring chaos and bring order. There's forces outside of ourselves that bring blessing and bring curses, right? Our postmodern world does this too. Okay. We tie it to intellectually being good. You are blessed if you think this way, cursed if you do not. All the fitness influencers, all the money gurus out there, right? All the self-help books, right? They're all just like, this is how you get blessed.
Yeah.
And if you don't do this, this is how you get cursed, right? Think and grow rich, or rich dad, poor dad. Blessing, curses. It's literally what it is. We do it today in our postmodern world. We don't attach it to religions anymore. We attach it to intellectualism.
Because it's something you can see, taste, touch, and smell.
Exactly.
And that is the only sure thing, because everything else is, who knows?
Yes. We worship our ability to decipher what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
And that will come in the future very soon, because that is what the knowledge of good and evil is.
Yeah.
But that's another show.
God, that's another, That's.
So what do we see in Genesis so far? This is the first few chapters. God blesses, and Genesis, not necessarily so far, but like, what do we see? We see God blessing and cursing people or things immediately within the first few chapters, right?
Yeah.
He's taking the narrative that they told themselves and saying, I am the one who does that. Did they, it's mind blowing. Did they see it? I hope so. So let's talk about some of the symbols God's already employed. We talked about darkness. We talked about the deep water, right? These are the anti-creations, what I'll call them. Here before he started creating, he started speaking, before he started carving, this is the world without God. Dark, chaos, covered in abyss or water. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the idea is forces of evil are all pooled together in the abyss. And then what you get, you guys see this picture. There's forces of evil, chaos pooled together. And then God is hovering over it, above it, beyond it.
Not a part of it.
No. But if they were following along their narrative and God's telling somewhat similar like themes of the narrative, what would they expect next? If there's the forces of chaos and then there's this God of order hovering over it, what would they expect next? You mentioned it earlier. You kept talking about how these creation stories all have the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm not there, but like he would intervene. He would be
violence. They would expect a battle.
A battle. Yes. A battle. Not what he's about to do, which is
read it. Go ahead.
Actually, okay.
Genesis chapter 1, 3, chapter 3, chapter 1, verse 3.
And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Wow. Wait. There's no battle? God speaks light. What is light? It opposes
darkness. It opposes, when there's something
and darkness represents chaos.
Right. Yeah.
He creates light. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you, but he overcomes darkness by speaking, not by a battle.
Yeah. Well, and this is something that's been in my conversations lately with different people, but it's like I heard this, and it's like you can either fight the darkness or you can just turn on a light.
Yes.
which is lack versus abundance
Yes.
mindset, where we go, I can either focus on,
Yes.
which is like when we talk about like Satan and we give him power and presence, and we got to be vigilant, we got to be careful, we got to all this stuff. It's like, no, you are giving him the very thing that he wants, which is attention, and our attention equals worship. If you want to worship and give something attention, you give it to God.
So good.
So you turn on a light and you live in abundance, and that opposes the dark.
Yes. Yes.
You do not have to focus on a fight because he's already won that fight.
Yes.
So good.
Do you see, though, how he is confronting the worldview of the Israelites that moment?
Yeah, there has to be struggle.
But no, there doesn't.
That's what they think.
Yes, but there doesn't.
No.
He separates light from darkness.
Which gets into, he's introducing peace and rest.
Yes. Okay. And then you have what is the swirling chaos, the undifferentiated waters, yet God spoke and he separated it. He didn't have to battle. There was not just these two entities that formed. He did it, and it just happened.
Mm-hmm. They all
and he calls the first day good.
Yeah.
It's a good day to create light and separate darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Woo! Next he speaks. We don't have to read them all, but next he speaks, because this is a very familiar verse. I encourage you to follow along in the Bible, but he speaks and he separates waters. Again, pulling from the Babylonian myth, yet showing a major difference. What's the difference? No battle.
Yeah.
No other gods, just one. Does he call this day good?
Which, the second day?
Day 2.
Day 2. Where does that end? Pause. No.
Why does he not call it good, in your opinion? Day 2. He separates the waters from above, the waters below. Evening, morning, day 2.
I don't know.
He creates nothing.
Yeah, well, because he does create something on the first day, which is light.
But he creates nothing.
But the light is separates.
But he only separates waters here, and waters are representing of what? Chaos. Evil, the anti-story.
Yeah.
Why would he call it good?
Right. Yeah, because there's nothing that opposes it.
He speaks and separates next day. He speaks and separates land. From what?
The water.
The sea. No battle. No body of a god needed to create land.
No.
Yahweh is saying, I speak and land happens. Like, the power of this story, the power that this story is conveying is revelatory to the ancient Israelites. And it should be to us today. It is exponentially more if you came in with the worldview that they had, that there was always a battle before creation, before land. He's like, I'm not the king of gods like Marduk because I won a battle. No, I'm the king of gods because I am.
Yeah. I was going to get to that earlier. Because, pause, on that thought, the Israelites, as far as we are aware, had no name for this God, Yahweh.
No.
Up until this point, up until actually, because obviously we have the story, we get to watch the story unfold. But like, if you insert yourselves into like when Moses is coming back from being 40 years in the wilderness, and he shows up, they say, okay, if you spoke to the God of our ancestors, what is his name? Who sent you? And Moses was smart enough to say, hey, they're going to ask me this. What do I say? I am. Or I will be who I will be.
Yes. See, and every other God pales in comparison because God is the ultimate power and authority, right? Mm-hmm. Fun fact, each of the miracles in Egypt, since we're there, of the Exodus story, they directly attack a god of Egypt, polytheistic society.
Yeah.
Each one directly attacks a god. God was showing Egypt and his people, I am far above these. There's no battle. I will, and I do. Like power. That's why Pharaoh was like, I don't care about our cattle. Did this attack happen to any of their cattle, because he was saying the precise nature of this God has never been seen before.
Yeah.
The Israelites' cattle were fine because God was so precise. I am above your gods. Your gods can't even do what I do. Elijah at Mount Carmel, your God can't even do what I do, which was against Baal, Marduk, the same God, over and over, right? So it's so good. Important note here, the first 3 days are more of a separation of things than a creation. An ordering of the chaos of the anti-creation. It's more of an ordering of the chaos.
Yeah.
The last 3 days, God fills what he separates with life.
Yeah.
So that's so good, because you were getting there earlier and now we're here.
Yeah.
In the narrative. Let's pause, because see, like, God speaks order to chaos. It obeys. Then he fills what he just separated with life and with purpose. So the stars, the moon, they have purpose. They're not just there. He's like, they will give you signs, right? It is not is that not just a retelling of Exodus? The chaos as slaves? Chaos and getting let go? Speaking order in the 10 Commandments and the Levitical law gives them a purpose to be a kingdom and a priest. Or maybe it's a retelling of our own story. Us before Jesus. Chaos.
Yeah.
Nothingness. Darkness. You alluded to that earlier too.
Yeah.
He's bringing order to the chaos, separates the waters, the abyss, the darkness. He fills us with life, then gives our life a renewed purpose. 2 Corinthians 5 says, you are a new creation. The old have passed away. Behold, all things have been made new. Paul saw the same metaphor. You are a new creation. He's alluding back to Genesis. The themes here in Genesis 1 are everywhere. Yeah. The imagery, the symbols, the language, the heart, the power. What does God say to Job? Where were you in creation?
Humble pie. That was a massive serving of humble pie.
It's everywhere. So let's continue. So day 4. Read day 4. I want you to read this one.
Okay, 14. Verse 14. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth.
Okay, good enough.
Cool.
Of course, there's more. God says, let us make lights. It said 2 great lights. The sun and the moon.
Which is funny, because it doesn't say sun and moon. It just says the great light.
2 great lights, right?
Yeah.
The greater to rule the day.
Yep.
The lesser to rule the night. And then there's this afterthought.
And the stars.
And the stars. Wait. But God said he was going to create 2, and then he creates 3. Told you 3 is important.
Yep.
In the creation narrative. And we're going to get to that even next episode, more on the 3. But here we're going to talk about the stars. That some call them the heavenly host. A symbol of stars in their time were gods. So, even up to the Greeks and Romans, Jupiter was the god of gods, and they named a star after him. Why? Because that star represented him. The ancients studied the sky, okay? But they didn't have the knowledge that we apparently have today. So they saw that there was patterns in the stars. There was order.
Yeah.
But there were some stars that didn't follow that order. They were deviant stars. Those are the planets.
Okay.
They move differently.
They move differently, yes.
They move differently than the rest of the stars. So the ancients started putting gods to these planets. They were the deviant stars that could break the order of the cosmos. I think that God says, let's create 2, and then 2 things, and he creates 3. It's because the third thing is a symbol, a metaphor of spiritual beings. I think it is actually angels, gods, both good and bad, ordered and deviant. And where are the angels found? Where are these stars found? In the darkness, right? Whew. In the darkness. And some don't follow. Jupiter, which again is the evolution of the ancient god Marduk, and Jupiter is known as the bright and morning star because it's the star that you can see. Jupiter lasts longer than any other star when it's available, and even when the sun's rising, you can still see Jupiter.
Yeah.
So it's the morning star. Let that mess with your theology later.
That's blowing my mind.
We have to, again, put ourselves in the ancient Israelite shoes, or shall I say sandals? They were looking for Marduk to save them to defeat chaos. I know the Israelites were. You want to know why? Because what did they say when Moses took too long on the mountain?
Let us fashion a god.
No, not a god. Let us fashion the God who delivered us from Egypt.
Yeah.
And what do they create?
A cow.
A calf. A young bull, which is the symbol of Marduk. Is what his name literally meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm telling you, that is crazy because these Israelites thought it was Marduk, and God is, Moses comes down. Of course, a lot of story happens, but when they start to hear the story, they will realize, oh my gosh, we were so wrong.
Yeah.
Because Marduk is just a created afterthought in the creation story.
Yeah. Like, so reading this story growing up, I would always picture like, oh, like the Israelites were like, hey, Moses is taking too long on the mountain. We're going to create a god that we can worship.
Like a new god, like a different god.
Yeah. Like that's the way you read it is like, we're going to create a new god and it's going to be a calf. And you're like, that's random. And then you're like, Aaron, make us a calf. Like, cause that's what he did. He fashioned things out of gold. And
he was a carver.
He was a carver. So he carved it in gold. And then and it required offering. So they all had to give like earrings and jewelry in order to melt them down. Like, so they had enough time while Moses was up there. So it wasn't just like, cause I think he was gone was he gone 40 days?
I believe so.
Yeah. I don't know how long it takes to make something like that, but you had to have at least enough time to pass. They get impatient. Then they have all this time to melt gold down and shape it, which I'm assuming is going to take a while. So I wouldn't say like they weren't very patient, but all that to say, I grow up thinking that it's just like they just made this god and they worshipped it, and it was just like that's so weird and like
they just made up a new god and they were like, all right, we're done with this
willy nilly. They're like, oh, we're so mad.
But that's not what the narrative says, and it's called the lullaby effect. We read it, we hear it, we see it so many times in kids' stories. We've heard it since if you've grown up in church, you hear it a lot, and you don't read it just with like as the story says it. You read it with these preconceived ideas already there.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it says they let us make the God who delivered us. Let's make an image for the God who delivered us.
Right.
And they're trying to make Yahweh.
Yeah.
And they make Marduk because I believe they believed Marduk was the God who delivered them because that's what Marduk's job did. He was provider and protector for the people.
Yeah. Yeah. And they do this seemingly out of what looks to be in this context, good hearts.
Yes.
They're like, oh, we want to worship this God. So let's make an idol. Let's make an image of him so that we can put our sight and, physically, they're trying to put like physics to something that is more spiritual and ethereal.
Earthly words to what they cannot say, which has been the point of the myths and the legends all along. And they had not received Genesis yet. They had not received this, so they didn't know.
Yeah. But
here's God, right? Oh, it's so good. You're seeing it. You're seeing it. You're seeing it. So like day 5, the same thing happens. It says, day 5, can you read day 5? Or can you find it fast this time?
Let's see if I can. Yep.
Go ahead.
And God said, this is verse 20. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind.
Okay.
And God saw that it was good.
Yeah, it was good. Of course it was good. Because God created it. But here's what's interesting. He says, let's create the swarming, like water swimmers.
Yeah.
And then let us create birds. And then the first thing he creates is sea creatures. And then the swarming water creatures that swim. And then the birds. My version says sea creatures, ESV. A better translation, or some translations say sea monster. I think it's a little better.
Yeah.
But the best translation to me is sea serpent. That he created sea serpents. The Hebrew word is tanin. Tanin. If you knew the ancient Mesopotamian story of creation and you hear this sea serpent, what are you thinking?
I think of a dragon.
You think of a sea dragon?
Which was very common. We're not used to like dragons being underwater, but like
That's why.
Yeah.
It's Tiamat. Tiamat was the sea dragon. She was seen as a dragon.
Ah.
And it's in the seas.
Oh gosh.
God is saying, you got to see this. I think the third thing he's creating that's not mentioned the first time is something more of a spiritual creature. But what God is saying is, I created what you fear. I created what you think brings chaos. I created it. I'm not saying God created chaos, because see, God said that it was good. There's a moment where the sea monster, where the sea serpent, which you can later see as the serpent in the garden, decides to rebel against God. I think the garden, the fall, is a story of the fall of man and the fall of the sea serpent.
Yes.
The symbol of the sea serpent, what the sea serpent symbolizes, excuse me. But here it is, right? The best thing is, though, God did not fight Tiamat. He created her.
Yeah.
This is a tool to show how weak, compared to God, this tormenting creature really is.
Yeah. And also, if God created it and said it was good, how poor their mindset was of something that they were believing.
Yes.
So, yes, this exists, but not in the capacity you think, which here, side tangent, brief, is how we treat Satan. Satan actually is, and I recently came to this, we make him a dragon. We make him this big behemoth thing that's evil and covering and like so bad and so terrible and like causes all this chaos. But what he really is a tiny little snake. Maybe a garden snake that has zero power, no effect.
Listen, you're right there, dude. Like, here's the thing. The great adversary is one of his names, right? The Satan, the adversary. What is he the villain of? Whose enemy is he? Cause here's the thing. He's not God's enemy. He's the enemy of creation and of man.
Yeah.
He's not God's enemy. I'm not saying God's friend. I'm saying God is so far above him that there is no enemy to God.
Right.
That's what God is saying in this creation story.
Enemy denotes like villain and hero.
That's what God's saying in this creation story. You've heard it, creation, where there's battles and there's this and there's that. Guess what? There's none of that, because I just speak because I am.
Yeah.
And boom. And even the thing that you start to fear that turned against creation, that became the agent of chaos in creation, this chaos, the serpent, this dragon that you fear, I created it.
Yeah.
And it used to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I'm he's so much far above it. Like, there is no enemy to God. Like, the adversary is an enemy to us, but not to God. Because God is so far above, which is what holy means, set apart, that it cannot even come close. So we so oftentimes have like missed that, because the question I guess I would have for people is God that big in your mind? And is the Satan that small in your mind?
Yeah.
Like, this is what God is doing. Why does he give them this? He's trying to give them a biblically correct worldview while writing the Bible.
Yeah.
But a correct worldview. It wasn't a battle. In fact, she's just part of creation.
Yeah.
Relax.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Crazy, right? The spiritual creature. So I'm not saying that chaos is not innately bad. Chaos with intentionality is innately bad. The intentionality behind it can be bad. But chaos itself is not bad. For instance, a storm is just a storm.
Right.
But intentionality behind evil oppressing people is evil. That's intentionality. And order is not innately good either. Order can be bad. So, for instance, too much chaos, you get anarchy. But too much order, you get tyranny.
Yeah.
Like, So, like, again, order and chaos are not innately anything, but when you get intentionality behind them, they can become innately bad, or they can become bad, or they can become good. So, anyway, we can keep moving. Day 6, he creates man, right? We know this, right?
Yep.
Day 6. But it says, creates 2 things, and then he said, let's create 2 things, and he creates 3 things. Man is the 3rd thing. So you have...
Wait, he did that before.
For the first 2.
He said, I'll create 2 things, and then he creates 3.
Yeah.
Huh.
So what you see is like this. What you see is the 3rd thing that keeps getting created is the spirit, is the creatures, the creation that has the spiritual element to it. You have the angels, possibly metaphorically speaking, with the stars. You have the serpent, the Satan, metaphorically with this the seeger dragon, and then you have man.
Yeah.
Being created, not just animals, but man, right?
Yeah.
It's so good.
Interesting. Side note: there's a Proverbs and I believe Psalms or Proverbs, Song of Solomon. Maybe the other one, Ecclesiastes. Anyway, he says 2 things. He'll say like 2 things man fears, or whatever the context is. Yes, 3 things.
So
like there's that pattern again.
Yes, there's a pattern here. Yes, exactly. Because this of continues throughout the rest of the scriptures.
Yeah.
The symbolism continues throughout the rest of the scriptures. Creatures are capable of good and bad, beings with agency.
Yeah.
So human beings, they're not created by gods or by the bodies of the dead gods, but they are created by one God. We are created good. And the kicker is we're made in whose image? God's.
Yeah.
The one who's above all things, outside time and space. The God who was the beginning, the God who needs not fight, only speak to subdue what our brains find as the greatest adversary. Again, the Satan is just a created thing. There is no battle.
Yeah.
Think of Genesis 3. Does the serpent have any response to the curse that God gives it? No, just sits there and takes it. It can't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Death and chaos all fall under his order as soon as he speaks. And this is the creation narrative. It is annihilating common beliefs they had. And maybe seen in this light, it can annihilate some of our common beliefs.
Yeah.
Right? This is a version of the Mesopotamian epic of creation. All the pieces are there. Sea monsters, darkness, chaos, creation of dry land, vegetation, man. Yet none of the battles, none of the other gods, just one God, the King of Kings.
Yeah.
So good, right?
Yeah.
So good.
So good. So good.
Oh my goodness. Note that all these symbols, chaos, darkness, water, sea monsters, they're pervasive throughout the entirety of the scriptures. And when you see it, you should come back to Genesis 1 in your mind. That's how God wants you to view these things. This is the beginning of a long, long story from Genesis to Revelation. And the story is God's. He's the main character, guys. Not us. He's the main character. He is the one who Israel's been waiting for in Exodus. He's the one they were waiting for in the Christ. And he's the one the world didn't know they actually needed. The one who at the end of this age will come and make right all that is wrong, will bring heaven and earth together forever. And guess what? There is no battle. God is hovering above all the chaos like a dove.
Sounds like something.
Yeah, I know, right? Reminds me of that old song, Above All Powers, Above All Kings.
I actually know the guy who wrote that song.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. Well, I hope you enjoyed the journey today. We will end, as we always do, with a prayer. Chase?
The Aaronic blessing. I'll read. I was gonna say read, but I'll say it in Hebrew as best as I can, and say it in English afterwards. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for embarking on this podcast journey with us at Hyperlink. Your support means the world to us as a listener-supported podcast. If you've enjoyed our episodes and would like to contribute, please consider visiting patreon.com/hyperlinkpodcast. Stay connected with us by joining our community on Facebook at Hyperlink, a podcast journey. We value personal connections and would love to hear from you individually. You can reach out to Nigel on social media platforms under the handle @HyperlinkNigel. And don't forget to connect with Chase on Instagram at bespoke_and_bourbon. If you have any questions or would like to book us for an event, please feel free to email us at hyperlinknigel@gmail.com. Thank you once again for tuning in and being a part of the Hyperlink Collective. See you on the next episode.